Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and let me declare that I have a joint ownership of a very small registered agricultural holding from which my wife and I derive no income whatsoever. Let me start by agreeing with something that Donald Cameron said, and I suspect the whole Chamber can agree, that we should demand that our farmers should be properly supported. But the debate is, of course, about what is proper support. And I always like to look at what the motions before us and the amendments before us are doing. And the very first and obvious thing, that the deletion that is the very first part of the Conservative amendment, the first 7 words that it deletes from the government motion is including fully replacing all lost EU funding. So we know straight away that the Conservatives are opposed to farming having the amount of funding that they currently get from the EU. So it ill behoves Peter Chapman or anyone else on the Conservative benches to talk about funding, to talk about lack of vision, to talk about kicking cans down the road, when the stark reality is the Conservatives are opposed to farmers having all the funding that they currently have under the scheme. And that's a matter that we'll have to account to farmers for. I'll just deal with the amendment first, if I may. I haven't quite finished. The amendment also ends and calls on the Scottish Government to ensure that it has sufficient legislative powers. Well, if it's got sufficient legislative powers, then it will legislate. But the Tories are clearly suggesting we do not have sufficient legislative powers and therefore cannot legislate. Now, I know that the motion that's before us is in the name of an advocate, and I have many interesting and informed discussions with him, and I suspect that he just didn't read something that somebody put in front of him to the end, because it makes no sense to suggest we don't have sufficient legislative powers unless it is being suggested from the Conservatives that, as we have suggested, powers have been taken away. I will take Mr Cameron, but I will come back to Mr Chapman.
Grateful for taking intervention.
Donald Cameron.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The point is, being made in that last sentence, is that without being part of the UK Agriculture Bill, you don't have the belt and braces approach that the NFUS have said will provide clarity now. That is the lack of legislative power. Why do the SNP not agree with the Welsh Government and the Northern Ireland administration that they too should be in the bill?
I understand the
Stewart
point.
Stevenson.
I understand the point that's been made in the debate, but I have to go back to the words that are on the page, which are fundamentally different. I will now take Mr Chapman, if he wishes.
Yeah, I thank
Peter Chapman, sorry.
I thank the member for taking an intervention. I want to come back on the fact that we don't want to see agriculture fully funded in Scotland. Of course we want to see agriculture fully funded, and we support the money, the convergence money coming fully back to Scotland. We've always been in that position, and that has never changed.
Can I say, Mr Stevenson, we're very short of time, no spare time at all, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was conscious of that when I did it. But I wanted to be fair to the Conservatives, because probably nobody else will be. But the bottom line, Presiding Officer, is including fully replacing lost EU fundings is being deleted by the Conservatives. And let's move on from that, because enough has been said on that subject. We all, I think, accept that farming is a very important part of our economy, and especially our rural economy. At Christmas, I was delighted to sit down, and everything on the table had come from no more than 50 miles from home, and I hope that was the case for others. But that won't be the case if we don't get the kind of environment that is important. Let me just pick up 1 or 2 points that I suspect others won't pick on. Looking at the National Council of Rural Advisors report and looking at some of the recommendations, some of the wider things beyond support from government. Action 4B in that report, ensure equitable access to finance for rural communities and businesses, including a simplified grant system. And that's great. However, when I pick up the Scottish Rural Action report that I got from the stand yesterday, It focuses, of course, on Royal Bank closures, a publicly owned bank by the government down south. And if we take banks out of communities, it's going to be a heck of a difficult. So it's not just about funding farmers, it's about the total infrastructure that we have. It also goes on at 8B to talk about micro-enterprises and encouraging women and young people. And I very much support that. I think that is an excellent way. But the bottom line that I think the Conservatives at Westminster in particular have to think about is what is the effect of creating barriers between Scotland, the UK for that matter, and one of our biggest markets in the EU. The National Farmers Union Scotland and others farmers' unions have called for frictionless trade. If we're not in the single market, we don't have frictionless trade. And if we don't have free movement of people, as the ministerial statement before this debate highlighted, we're going to find it very difficult to start farms. Not just strawberry farms in Fife, but raspberry farms in Fife. I once worked on one many donkeys years ago. And that is to the very heart of the problem that confronts us. Yes, it's about farming direct to farmers, but it's about the total system. It's not looking terribly good, Presiding Officer.